Hello, everyone. Welcome to our December Policy Committee meeting. So today we have, to start us off, some tips for engaging with labor market information. Any of you all who were with us last time, we talked about the Model Program of Study Guides, which have some labor market information. And there was a lot there that folks were really interested in, so we decided to kind of jump off from that a little bit. And then we'll have some highlights from the Illinois School Report Card. And then my Anya is going to lead us in a little bit of a discussion about career exploration. And then we're going to wrap up just with some kind of discussion about what is coming from the policy committee in the next year before we wrap up. So thanks, everyone. We're really happy you're here today. That's what we've got on the docket. I think with that, I will hand it off to Megan Mitchell to lead us through a little bit of information about kind of tips and things when you want to engage with your own labor market data. Like I said, we talked about the Model Program of Study Guides last time. A lot of people are really interested in adapting those for their own regions or communities, or just kind of diving a little bit deeper in the data that we use when we develop those. So that's what she's going to talk to us all about today.
Thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Megan Mitchell, and I'm the Director of Pathways at Systems Center. And I am excited to talk to you about some labor market data, particularly how you can use this data to help you identify priority occupations. And so what you see here is a snapshot of what is a part of the Model Program of Study Guides. And so for right now, we're going to stick with IT as an example. But if you look at this document from right to left, the first thing that you'll see on the right side of the screen is how we uplift labor market data. And so that labor market data is important because it really guides us into thinking about those particular academic programs, whether it be certificates or associate degrees that lead to those particular occupations. And so from there, we're able to dive deeper into those particular academic programs and really uplift those important or strategic dual credit courses. And so I wanted to show you all this particular page here because it kind of shows how it's all essentially connected. So we start with the labor market data. We think about how those particular occupations, how you can lead to those particular occupations through particular academic programs, and then how we dig deeper into those academic programs to uplift strategic dual credit courses. And so here's a closer look of what that particular labor market data looks like. And so in this table here, you'll see that we've uplifted typical jobs. We're looking at living wage potential, the hourly wage there, growth over 10 years, the annual job openings, and of course, the typical educational requirements. And so these pieces are very important. So when you think about the growth over 10 years, we want to make sure that we're leading to occupations that are going to be available and accessible for students as they progress within their careers and even graduate from various academic programs. And then we want to think about those particular annual openings, like how many of these jobs are going to be available for these students. And then what's newer to this work, or what we've updated in the past year, is the living wage potential. And you'll see a range there. On this particular slide, you'll see particularly high and medium, but sometimes there is a low living wage potential there too. And so here we're uplifting, we're categorizing the living wage potential for these particular roles. And so we've identified a median range for that. For that, we really look at the average cost for one adult plus one child and what that looks like for students. And we're able to break that down into categories of high, medium, and low. And so the important piece to think about, or variables, is when you're looking at that living wage potential, is how many adults and children a family may have, how many adults are working in a household, and then, the location. And so we're able to really think about how to localize this information. And so in the Model Program Study Guides, it's an average for the entire state of Illinois. However, you can use this tool to kind of think about what that can look like within your particular area. And again, living wage is, the minimum salary needed for your living expenses, really like what you need to pay your bills, like to live day to day. And that's based on a particular community. And so I want us to take a moment to kind of explore what this tool looks like. So Laura or Danya, if you all could take this link and drop it in the chat for me, that would be extremely helpful in this moment. So I'm gonna click on here and just kind of give you all a snippet. And so when you first go to the web page, you'll see the landing page here. Then you can click in your location. I'm gonna use Chicago because that is where I am located. And so you will be able to see how you can break this information down. So if it's important for you in your area, think about living wage potential based on one adult plus one child, or one adult, no children, or two adults, one working with a wide variety of number of children, or two adults both working with a range of children. Then you can look at what the living wage is for that. And it's broken down by hourly wage. And so you can kind of use that to kind of benchmark those particular occupations that you want to identify as high priority. Again, we want to look at those occupations that are going to provide a living wage. They're going to have growth, over the span of 10 years. They're going to have some openings for students as well. I'm going to scroll down here because we often get like, what are typical expenses? So when you scroll here, you'll see to your left, what all that living wage number entails. So it's food, childcare, medical expenses, housing, and then, among all the other things here that you can see what's calculated in that particular number. So I'm going to allow for you all time to just kind of dive in there, and I'm going to continue with our presentation here. But if there are any questions about that, feel free to, raise your hand or unmute yourself, and I'm happy to address those as well. And so some questions that we often get is, what information do we have for various jobs? So the Department of Labor, they survey workplaces and collect information about the number of people employed, education requirements, skills needed, typical roles and salaries. They also survey individual employees and job experts, again, in the sense of like the educational attainment, salaries, and the day-to-day experience. And so again, this data is available at the federal and state, and then of course, sometimes even local. And so how we gather that data, we gather in two different locations. So Career One Stop is a Department of Labor website that you can explore, but also the Illinois Department of Employment Security is also an opportunity for you all to look at very localized data too. And I've kind of uplifted some employment projections and also some wage information, particularly from the state of Illinois, but you can get the same, very similar information from Career One Stop, and it's very user-friendly. Illinois Department of Employment Security, they're giving you like a huge spreadsheet, right? And so in that spreadsheet, you'll have to kind of go through and kind of uplift various occupations that you're interested in zeroing in on. So for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to have you all follow me to Career One Stop. So if Laura, if you all could drop that link in the chat as well, that would be extremely helpful too. So here you'll see the landing page, and here's kind of where, as you are meeting with leaders in your areas and you're thinking about, industry and particular jobs, you can kind of type in an occupation and then a location. So I'm going to type in nurse practitioners, right? And then I'm going to say Chicago. Chicago, Illinois. And I'll show you what comes up here. So this website is extremely helpful because there's a ton of information here. So you have a description of what that particular role does. There is a career video that dives a little bit deeper into that description as well. And then you can see some projected employment numbers. And so there's a comparison between Illinois and the rest of our states. So you'll see 2022 employment and then 10 years out from there, what the projected employment is, the percentage change there, which is 41%, and then the annual projected openings in our state, which is 850. So this tells me that this particular role would be identified as a high priority occupation because there's significant growth and there's significant numbers of projected job openings for this position. And then here, they even tell you that here, right? When you look at the Outlook, will there be jobs? And then it says, new job opportunities are likely in the future. And so that is how user-friendly Career One Stop is as a tool. It kind of also uplifts education experience to get started. It tells you people starting in this career usually has a master's degree. And then when you can look at the wages here, and then even you can click here for the hourly wage, and you can toggle between hourly and annual wages. Then you'll see 10%, 25%, the middle range, and even the higher ranges of what the salary outcomes are for that role. Typical education broken down by percentages here. If there are any certifications available, any licensings, that you need. If there's apprenticeship, there are some skill sets and some knowledge points. It even uplifts like the day-to-day activities that one would engage in for this role as well. There are some abilities here, and then also some related occupations. So I'm going to allow for you all to take some time and just peruse that website and become familiar with it. And hopefully you'll be able to use it as a tool. I also encourage you to take a deep dive into Illinois Department of Employment Security too, because that is extremely helpful and also has some localized information for you as well. And so some quick important practices to consider here when you're using labor market data is to meet with various local industry members to understand like local need, like what is happening within your particular region or area. We encourage you to use your local living wage to determine high priority occupations and consider those occupations that are in high demand, have high growth potential, and potentially have some work shortages as well. And then lastly, you want to make sure that training and educational programs are aligned and available for selected occupations too.
Thank you so much, Megan. I think that was a lot of really, really awesome tools for everyone. So I appreciate you sharing that with all of us. As I finish sharing from here, you will see that the next thing we're going to talk about is some highlights from the Illinois School Report Card. So I'll talk about this as I go, but I'll also preface this with, this is pretty like brief overview of some key points. We are planning, as some of you may have been to in the past, to hold a data deep dive in January where we'll go quite a bit more in depth into some of this data and some new data. So, whenever we review data with this group, we really encourage you all to think about, what questions does this data prompt for you? What does it make you want to know more about? What does it make you wonder? I encourage you today, especially since we're planning that data deep dive, to drop any kind of questions like that in the chat so that if there's a way we can work in some of those things to the data deep dive, we know that that's what you would like to hear from us. But a little bit of an overview of, what this little portion today is what we're aiming to do, what our goals are here, which is review some key college and career readiness and transition data points from the 2024 Illinois School Report Card. Reflect on this data. Like I said, we really want to hear what this helps you ask and use that to shape our data deep dive. So with that, I'll move on to our first piece here, which is early college coursework participation trends. So you'll see we have a line for dual credit and a line for AP. My little toolbar is covering the key. So I believe the purple is dual credit and the green is AP. Someone nod at me to let me know if that's right. Thanks. Yeah, so what we can see here is that dual credit is continuing to increase. The AP coursework in the state did dip a little the past few years, but it's coming back up again. So I think that as far as the early college coursework participation trends, obviously we're seeing still more AP than dual credit, but the dual credit is continuing to grow in the state, which I know is a huge part of the strategy and the conversations we have. I know part of the model program of study guides and labor market information we just talked about is to help us prioritize strategic dual credit. So I think it's neat to see that, the dual credit is continuing to increase here. Our next piece, still on the lines of dual credit, is disaggregated by race, ethnicity. So you can see here, this is, I feel like, a really good example of why we always want to look at the disaggregated data when we're talking about these things, because if you look at the top line, which is the overall, things are going up, things are, increasing at a pretty good rate. But if you look at the other lines, especially for Black and Hispanic students, we're seeing quite a bit of a gap, right? It's not reflecting the growth that is happening when we look at the overall numbers. So, I think it's a good example of why disaggregating the data is important, because, I bet you a lot of the folks on here might have some questions or wonderings about why that gap is continuing to kind of maintain itself, and what we can do to close it. So I would say, we're seeing a little bit of increase with Hispanic students and with Black students, but the rates, I think, are kind of one of the interesting pieces there, as well as obviously it's the gap. Then we have this percent change in dual credit enrollment, again, broken down by race, ethnicity. I think this is particularly interesting because you'll see that for the 23-24 school year, we're kind of back around the increases that we were seeing in the 2021 school year, but there were some interesting things happening in between. And I think, especially I have a lot of wonderings about the 21-22 school year. And obviously it's great that the change is trending positive again, but it's an interesting kind of picture here to look at these bar graphs and see one, again, kind of talking about some of those gaps that we noticed in the last slide, but also just the overall pictures are interesting as well, from going from positive to negative back to positive here. Next up, we have 4-year high school graduation rate. So I think something that is kind of a nice takeaway here is that they're pretty much continuing to level out. So in the 2021 school year, obviously there was a little bit of a dip for most of our demographics, but it's leveling out. So that is an interesting piece with the 4-year high school graduation rate. Now this next one, total number of college and career pathway endorsements. So this is another one where we look at the whole and we look at the disaggregated, and we have, I think, a little bit of different pictures here, right? The whole, we're seeing that, with some of the pushes from legislation, with some of the work that a lot of you are doing in your communities, the college and career pathway endorsements are really scaling up. We're seeing a lot more students completing and receiving those endorsements in the last couple of years. But when we break it down by race, ethnicity, you can see that the proportions there don't really reflect the demographics of the state quite the same way. So I know that it's prompted us, and I think some of you on here, to have some questions about, what are the goals of the college and career pathway endorsement, and is it reaching the students we want it to reach? And so I think that is something that over the next couple of years we might want to explore a little bit further. But that is college and career pathway endorsements. And then we have post-secondary enrollment within 16 months of graduation. So you can see it is interesting here because I feel like in a lot of like base level conversations people have about post-secondary enrollment, there's a lot of concern about declines and the cliff. And it is declined from, 2017, but what we're actually seeing with a lot of this data is that the rate of decline is a little slower. I think it's a little bit more so with the two-year colleges. But actually from 2020 and 2021, it's a little bit up. So I think some interesting pieces here when we talk about post-secondary enrollment, I feel like there's kind of like the base, like you're just talking with someone at a conference about it versus looking at the data. Sometimes there are some interesting questions and pieces that come up when you actually dive into the data. This next one is community college remediation rates. I can't see the key again. I feel like the key would be helpful here. Hold on, let me see if I can move this without.
Write it out in the chat too. We've got yellow communications, math is green, purple is overall, and orange is reading.
Thank you, Danya. I was the little bar that has all the controls is blocking the key, and I don't want to accidentally do something.
Always happens to me.
Yeah, so I think, this kind of is similar to what we saw last year. I think mostly steady, maybe a little bit of a decline. But I think it shows us that compared to where the remediation rates were in 2016 and 2017, there's still quite a bit of progress being made on these rates, even if they're leveling off a little bit. So that is our community college remediation rates. So that's our last kind of visualization we have. These are some other recent reports that have come out. Danya, since you're so good at it, I know I didn't ask you to do this, but if you want to share any of these links, they'll also be in the slide deck we share. So if you don't want, there'll be plenty available for you all. And I know that these are probably some things that you might take a little more time to sit with if you really want to explore them. But we have an iWork report about high school seniors who did not attend college. I know that this is a question I feel like anytime I've had conversations about post-secondary enrollment that comes up is the students who aren't going to college, what are they doing? So I'd be really interested to see more. And these are some things we might pull from for our data deep dive. So if you're looking at kind of these brief descriptions and you are really interested in them, please let us know so we know kind of what you want to hear in the deep dive in January. The Community College Research Center has outcomes of high school dual enrollment students, state by state analysis. So kind of how do we in Illinois compare with other states? What are other states doing? Are there any states that are doing really awesome that we need to look at a little further? And then the Georgetown Center for Education and Workforce, future of job projections through 2031. I know there have been a lot of conversations about, what the jobs of the future look like and what kind of credentials they require, and that they will pretty much all require or mostly require some type of credential, even if it's not that traditional four-year degree. So I think investigating projections would be some valuable insight into, what kind of along the lines of what Megan was talking about with the labor market information of what's good to prioritize. So if there's anything else that you are reading or that you are aware of that kind of would be interesting for folks to look at or for us to look at as we pull together our data deep dive, please drop them in the chat. If you want to, unmute and tell me, you can do that as well. But this, like I said, this was a pretty just quick overview. The data deep dive will be much more in depth. So if this is prompting a lot of thoughts for you and you really want to dig deeper, I would highly encourage you to register for that data deep dive. It's going to be January 23rd. The registration link, I'll share it again at the end if you want to sign up for that or our next policy committee meeting. All right. That brings me to our next portion, which is Danya.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dania Ibrahim. I'm the innovation manager here at Ed Systems, which means that I get to work with all sorts of innovations in education, including work-based learning. And today we're going to be doing a focus on one aspect of work-based learning, career exploration, which is a term likely many of you have heard and engaged with in different ways, whether it's a term you use colloquially or as a part of the work-based learning continuum, as a part of your work with the college and career pathway endorsement. And so, before we go into this session, we'll do a little bit of grounding in common terminology and what we consider career exploration. We'll do a little bit of talking about some new policies on career exploration in middle school. And then we're going to hold a discussion after sharing some resources. We'll hold a discussion about career exploration in middle school because I know it's one that a lot of people have different thoughts on. And so we'll have some space to have everybody engage a little bit later. So this is something many of you have likely seen before, this work-based learning continuum. Essentially, it's a series of different kinds of experiences that students can have to engage in work-based learning, starting from career awareness, something that is more so done at the school itself and ranging all the way to some of these more intensive post-employer intensive experiences, such as engaging with career development experiences, looks like internships, apprenticeships, and in the middle having these different experiences like career exploration and team-based challenges, which are done with support of a host and employer and the school working together. And so students typically engage along this continuum in a series of experiences to continue to build their career awareness and better understand their own goals and what types of careers are available to them. We're going to focus in here on the second piece right here, career exploration, and really fully define it. It's one that typically gets confused with the career awareness step, so I want to define both together. Career awareness essentially is just the process, it sounds like what it is. It's the process by which students become aware of possible jobs. It could be done through things like career clusters, doing things that are not directly engaging with an employer themselves. Whereas career exploration is this step further from career awareness in which students actually engage with an employer in some way. This could be through, things that a lot of us have seen in our schools, job shadows, career expositions, employer site visits even. And it's really important for us to clarify these two because they're ones that often get confused with one another. And so the big distinction here is that when students are engaging in awareness activities at the beginning part of that continuum, they're not necessarily engaging with an employer. They're doing things that are much more personal and could be done right at the school, career interest surveys, watching videos of different employers, self-reflection activities, just learning to reflect and understand themselves a little bit better. Whereas career exploration typically has this aspect of direct employer relationship and actually engaging in person with them, career fairs, guest speakers, beginning relationships with mentors, things like that. Essentially, what the college and career pathway endorsement is made up of is having a minimum of 2 exploration activities or 1 intensive career exploration experience, having 2 team-based challenges and at least 60 cumulative hours of participation in a career development experience. And what this college and career pathway endorsement does is essentially validates work that students are doing to engage in these different career-related activities, to put in that effort to really build their awareness and expertise as they head into their next step, whether it be post-secondary or the workforce. And one big thing that I really want to point out here that is a new change in the rules about the college and career pathway endorsement is that there is, there's a new addition in which activities that take place through 6th and 12th grade may be included as a career exploration activity with at least one of those taking place between 9 and 12. So the thing that we really want to focus in on here is now there's this addition that students can be getting credit for their experiences between 6th and 9th grade. And so 6th and 8th, which is typically our middle school years. And so we really want to focus in on the opportunity that this may provide for middle schoolers to be able to engage in some of this exploration. And before I get into how that may be done, I want to clarify something about middle school career exploration and what I think it is and isn't. So we mentioned earlier, like we're talking a lot about career related experiences and building an awareness and preparing for the world after high school, right? But I want to clarify that while that is the goal of this overall sequence and this overall engagement, it's really not the goal of middle school career exploration in itself. Middle school career exploration is not about pigeonholing students into a specific career and telling them what they can and can't do. It's really not about limiting what their future options are and making them feel like they should cut off any of their options if they're not ready to do so, if they really know that's not within their interests. It really is about exploring the connection between identity and career, learning skills that help all of us, essential employability skills that help all of us at any age, which are things like learning to reflect, knowing what they like, knowing what their strengths are, building that self-awareness, building, so like I mentioned, those employability skills and preparing for that next step, not that next step being what is after high school, that next step being what am I going to do as I head into my high school experience? How can I prepare? What kinds of clubs can I join? What kinds of activities do I want to be on the lookout for? And so it's really about gaining that awareness, giving students that opportunity to explore these things in a safe space that helps them maybe not have to flounder as much in early high school when they're still learning about what kinds of opportunities and pathways they can engage in, depending on what the opportunities at their local high school are. So I want to mention that because it's a really important grounding point for the rest of this conversation, where we're not talking about middle schoolers choosing the rest of their life. We're talking about helping them engage in these conversations about identity as it relates to the world around them and learning these things about where they fit into the world around them. And so for just some more thoughts on that, I'm leaving a blog post in the chat just as a resource if these are some more thoughts that you're interested in engaging in. It's a thought piece that we put together here at Ed Systems, just about this idea of ensuring that when students are engaging in these experiences, that it's not so much that we're pigeonholing them, that we're rather opening their eyes and minds to the experiences, helping them grow as young people and helping them develop skills. So just wanted to pop that in the chat before moving forward. There's also statewide frameworks that are supportive in the same type of mentality. So the post-secondary and career expectations framework, which I'm also going to put in the chat here. One moment. Is essentially a guide for students and families and educators to be able to outline what kinds of experiences middle schoolers can engage in to and make informed decisions about their future planning. And it focuses on these really core areas, again, going back to this idea of like identity and, helping students explore, focuses on these three core areas, which are aspiration, self-advocacy, and planning. And it helps put those things into a series of milestones of what students can be doing at the end of each grade year. And the kinds of things that exist in the PACE framework are things like knowing about a wide range of career, being able to explore interests and strengths, as you see here, by the end of 6th grade. By the end of 7th grade, being able to engage in a self-reflection, being able to explore habits, being able to explore strengths, effectively asking for help, a skill that I still struggle with. So a good one to focus on in earlier years. And by the end of 8th grade, being able to, begin exploring those career interests, developing a plan so that as you head into those high school years, you might have a better idea of the kinds of things that you want to engage in. We've also put together some resources at Ed Systems about career exploration. And now I want to note that these were put together with high schoolers in mind, but they're ones that can also be useful when thinking about middle schoolers. I have this mentality that when we think about what is good for middle schoolers for career exploration, when we think about how good it is to encourage them to engage in these self-reflection activities and be really thoughtful about their strengths and their interests, and give them the kinds of mentorship that helps them really understand what they're good at and what they could work on and how that relates to them and the world around them. I think these are all skills that we can really be focusing on for great experiences for high schoolers as well. And so all the resources that we have for great career exploration in high school relate to middle school, and I think vice versa as well, that like not every single career exploration experience is equal, but in all of them, we should be thinking about how we help our students develop as people. And so we've put together this high quality criteria document, which again, I'll send in the chat right here. Essentially, this was put together with work-based learning stakeholders around the state to think about what it is that really makes for a good experience for all of the components of the work-based learning continuum, but focusing in here on the career exploration. That full document in the chat has the full continuum as well as systems and processes, so that it could help in even just like the creation of these experiences. But essentially, we've put together a shortened list of criteria of what we think makes the best experiences for students, and the high quality criteria here on this side show what we can be doing as career coordinators, district administrators, teachers, et cetera. And on the right here, one of our incredible and very important stakeholders as a part of this work was a high school student from Barrington High School, our intern, Emily Wan, who helped also put together some I can statements to be thinking about what students can be doing as a part of these different components. And so this really is here as a resource for you as you think about career exploration activities and other continuum components and how you can make them the best experience for students. Seeing something here in the chat. Yeah, Emily Wan, shout out. She is just the best. There's also schools that have begun doing this. This is not an entirely new concept to be bringing in conversations about careers, identity, and aspirations into the middle school space. An example that we have here at Elm Middle School, again, I'll be sending in the chat for those that would like to take a look. We have two examples here in the chat, and I'll go over them one by one. Elm Middle School offered a career studies course where essentially they engaged in conversations throughout a full semester for middle school students to focus on different types of careers, different types of fields, and engaging with employers. And so what we have here in this resource is a combination of perspectives and resources to see what they did as a part of their career studies course. Contains student to teacher perspectives, a little bit more about the course itself and what they did. And some resources for administration as well, if those are helpful. But really what this course helped students do was engage with different business partners that were coming to the classroom and really broaden their perspective on many different fields. And some places are even starting to do this work in elementary schools in light and fun ways. Skokie Elementary has done in the past a community career night in which they bring together parents, teachers, employers from around the community and make a very fun and engaging hands-on experience for students to learn about the different kinds of things that are happening in their community, meet with the community partners and engage on. And some of those people brought in some hands-on activities for those students to engage in and really get like a feel for the kinds of different work that exists. And again, done in a way that is really meant for students to explore and learn and just get to engage in their community with their parents alongside them. I'm going to go ahead and send one last link in the chat. I know we're link overhauling today, but I want to share this Padlet because as we start to think about these new rules in middle school career exploration, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of what ifs, like the career exploration space in high school is still being built out for many places. The coordination of those experiences and tracking of those experiences are still things that are being solidified and continue to be improved at different schools. And so I want to stop this share here and open a Padlet to engage in some critical conversations about what this actually looks like. And so I'll read out these questions, and then I want to give a moment for folks to engage in the Padlet and respond silently, think about some of these questions, or even feel free to unmute if that feels comfortable to you. So the first question here is, how can career exploration be approached in a non-industry specific manner that intentionally exposes students to a variety of options, equipping them with knowledge to make informed decisions as they enter high school? So how do we do this in a way that we are, doing the kinds of things that we're saying that are good for students, which is, not limiting their selections, not limiting their awareness, but ensuring that we're doing this in a way that opens their minds to the possibilities. How can we engage in career exploration for grades 6 to 8 in a way that aligns with the PACE framework that was sent in the chat, especially emphasizing social emotional learning and essential skills over specific career interests? Again, following on that point about building skills, interests, and awareness. Really want to ask here, like, what, as I'm sharing this information, and as we know now that there's this opportunity for validating students' experiences in the middle school space through the CCPE, it's really good to ask ourselves here, what is the purpose of middle school career exploration, and how we can provide students with freedom and flexibility to develop those skills without steering them. And then this final last one is a bit more of a administrative tracking question. If you yourself, or if schools you know of are engaging in this work, how are schools ensuring that the completion of middle school career exploration is communicated to high schools for inclusion in the CCPE? If it's not in place yet, maybe what could this process of implementation look like? So this link has been sent in the chat. If you haven't used Padlet before, the way that it works is you don't have to sign in, you don't have to do anything. You can enter as a user with an anonymous username and just add comments right here under any of these. And I'll just give just a moment for folks to spend some time thinking about these questions and put any answers that they feel comfortable putting on our Padlet. Awesome. I want to thank everyone for their engagement in this. We're seeing a lot of really great answers on here. Some great thoughts to munch on. Does anybody want to share what they've written aloud or contribute to the conversation aloud?
I can go first if you'd like on the first question. I was one that put in the Career Spark event. If you haven't attended, they highlight all 8 CT areas and then within the zone. I run the AF&R zone at Career Spark, so we do about 32 different stations. And I think it's really important that they get that, like, kind of like an elevator speech, but it's an elevator hands-on activity for 2 to 3 minutes to expose them to different things. And it gets them and prompts them to ask questions. And I think that's a great opportunity for us. Someone else put down, like, the high school students. We had high school students teaching a lot of the activities. So then they talked about the courses they took in high school to get to where they're at. And then the industry then elaborates on, like, the internship and in their process of what opportunities they have. So I think the high school students is another key aspect that helps kind of put the whole pathway together. And then they see themselves and they see their peers, like they've seen some of these students around in their communities. I think that really just helps them connect to, like, well, maybe they struggled with certain things like I do, but they've gotten this far as well and developed as a leader or a career path. And I think that's something we need to also be mindful of career exploration. They have to see what their peers before them have done to see that level of success. And I think that helps motivate them more than us adults can motivate students. I think their peers can motivate them. So I think that's just something to keep in mind and an opportunity there. And then my last one on the right there, for tracking it, AET is an ag experience tracker in agriculture, but they have a CT version in agriculture education. We finance literacy is one of our big always push. So it's a way for them to track that data, but it also tracks for them for what they've done community service wise, team-based challenges and those things. And they can note all those experience, dual credit, and it carries with them and it never gets lost. And it's affordable for school districts. And I like that process, how it can go from middle school all the way through high school and beyond.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, John, for what you've shared and what you've written. I want to shout out Career Spark too. Like, what an incredible event that y'all have put together that I've only heard wonderful things about. And on the note about the high school students that you brought up, I think that's such a great point that the students may see themselves better. And especially if we're working on them, even just thinking about that next step and preparing for high school, that to have those high schoolers come in will help them see themselves a little bit more clearly. And also what a great experience for those high schoolers involved to get to mentor and also build their essential skills as well. So it feels like a win all around. These are all some really wonderful ideas. And thank you for noting that specific tracking as well. Well, I'm seeing a lot of great things on here. I'll move on to the second note here and highlight some of these. I'm seeing a lot of hands-on. I'm seeing a lot of that we have to be creative about how we get them engaged. I saw in another comment over here that it's important to have students do this during the actual school day and being mindful of their school hours and what they can actually attend to make sure that it's an equitable experience that all students can engage in the hours that they're already at school. I'm seeing here workshops, skill building, mentorship activities, seeing lots of passionate responses here about this early exposure being important, but like without pressure, ensuring that we're giving a diverse set of experiences, ensuring that we're focusing on the soft skills that we've been talking about. I see here this note about pamphlets and flags in classrooms to visualize, engage opportunities that exist. I think that's such a great note. We actually recently did some work with our Student Advisory Council for the Illinois Success and Career Education and Career Success Network. And those students actually went and talked to their peers at school and figured out, did some thinking about what it was that was inhibiting them or their peers from engaging in work-based learning experiences. And a lot of it was just not knowing what exists, both in the experiences at their school and the kinds of, and like in that same vein, the kinds of experiences that they can engage in outside of school, the kinds of opportunities that exist in terms of jobs and industries. And one of the solutions that was brought up by our SAC students was that like a lot of this just needs to be seen in the class, not just in the flyers around the school in the lunchroom, but like that it needs to even be mentioned, once by their teacher or put up in somewhere in the physical classroom itself for them to ensure that they're seeing it. And so that's been a big point brought up by our students themselves as well. I'm seeing here some more support on this diverse experiences. And then for some of the specifics about tracking, without me going in and I'm seeing a lot of like similar themes across these first three, that like they're to think really hard about the kinds of skills that we want students to be gaining and giving them diverse and hands-on experiences for them to be able to do so, ensuring that they know about the opportunities in the classrooms themselves, making it accessible to them. I'm seeing some good questions here on this side about how this might look for unit districts versus districts that are not collaborating in that same way. I'm seeing a question here about how schools are thinking about this on transcripts. Seeing a question here about how middle school interests can also inform programs in high school, and what high school programs or effort is being put into. I'm seeing from here, Brave Centipede. I love these names that all of you have been given as well. Has noted that they feel that every district is different, but the CTE departments and admin need to head this up to ensure students are getting the credit. And so very much like, we don't all have answers, but then the notion that we're getting here is that this needs to be a coordinated effort across administration, that it needs to be headed up early on, and that thinking about that and planning early on to ensure that students are getting that credit and that there's some sort of cohesive communication may help make this a much easier thing to track. And I know the way that different schools and different districts are tracking is very different across the state. So I don't want to impose any specific thoughts about that, but I guess we're leaving here with this best practice to think about it very early, to acknowledge that there could be better communication across these different moving pieces, to acknowledge that it could be, it could be a coordinated district effort to ensure that students are getting that credit. And maybe we'll have some sort of future conversation about best practices for tracking, because I know that that's always one that across the board, middle school to high school or just within high school itself, is a challenge. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all for your incredible thoughts. I'll leave this Padlet. Again, it's in the chat for you to continue to engage in the thoughts of those around you. If this is work that you're engaging in, I hope that you feel like you have gotten to learn from others. I feel if this is work that you have not engaged in yet, I hope that this has sparked some interest in you, just to know that This is both a possibility to be able to validate those student experiences, to be able to open up their opportunities and understanding of their opportunities at a little bit of a younger age. And that it can be done in a way that very much can be mindful of growing them as people, and that also whatever kinds of efforts we put into growing our middle schoolers and being thoughtful about not limiting them, that we can also carry into our work with high schoolers as well. So I want to thank you all so much for this time. Thank you, Laura, for having me here today, and thank you all for your engagement.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danya. I feel like anytime we can have a good discussion with this group is always appreciated. So it's not just me and other Ed Systems people talking. So thank you. We are in the home stretch. I'm going to share the deck for a little bit longer. We have kind of one little section and some wrap up left for you all. So might even be able to get you out of here a little early. We'll see. Famous last words, I feel like. Let me get this back over here. All right, so since we're at the end of the year, and this is, I feel like a conversation that keeps on happening, right? What's gonna happen after the winter break? What does that look like? I know I already mentioned part of it, but a little bit of what our plans for the policy committee in 2025 are. So we're gonna stick with, relatively the same general approach, right? So we will have the data deep dive on January 23rd. We're gonna continue with quarterly meetings. So you'll see the next one will be March 4th, and then it'll be roughly the same cadence of June, September, and December. And then something else that we are thinking about, and we have done in the past with the policy committee, is potential work groups. So these will be time bound, they'll have a discrete focus. Kind of on, I would say the purpose of work groups with this is really like, what are things that the policy committee is interested in diving into a little deeper. So that's kind of the initial picture and approach for 2025 and beyond. Before we talk about more specifically about work groups, because I do have some potential topics and a poll for you. So those of you who stuck around get to put your voice in on what work groups you're interested in. But before I get to that, are there any other ways you'd like to be engaged? Any other things you'd like to hear about from the policy committee? Any topics or questions that are coming up, pretty regularly in your day-to-day conversation and your roles that you think either you would be able to talk about or you would want to hear someone talk about? So potential work group ideas. So again, the goal here is kind of what do we want to dive into more deeply? These are ideas we came up with based on your input. We are not deciding anything today. This is just to kind of gauge interest and kind of get some feedback from you all. An example of work that has been done in a policy committee work group before. If you were around, you may be familiar. If you're newer to this group, you might not, but we had our first work group was specifically tasked with exploring transportation related barriers that were impacting student participation in work-based learning. So we had a work group, met a handful of times to really understand the barriers related to transportation that were coming up for students with a particular focus on in-school youth. We were working sort of in collaboration with another group that was planning to explore the similar thing for out-of-school youth. So we kind of focused on how we could complement each other's work. We coordinated with them. We shared our final results with them. We released 2 memos, one about barriers and one about strategies and potential solutions. So part of this can be shaped by whoever participates in the work group and what those final products are. But like I said, we had 3 sort of topics for our next work group that were largely influenced by previous comments, previous discussions, previous ideas with the policy committee. So the first one is around the college and career pathway endorsement currency. So if you were here at our meeting last quarter, Megan talked, or maybe it was we talked about this in a meeting, the currency. So the idea of what are students getting that will be a benefit for them from their completion of a college and career pathway endorsement. And what almost also like what kind of incentive does that create? Right now, there is a lot of work being done with community colleges and local communities around this idea of currency, but we keep hearing more interest and more desire for opportunities to develop statewide currency. So this group would explore a little bit of both, but I think a big part of it would be, what would that statewide currency look like? Or what would we hope it would look like? The next one is graduation requirements. So I think this came out of some conversations about, as districts are looking to do work-based learning, as they're looking to add more career-focused dual credit classes, they're getting a lot of challenges with the graduation requirements just being a lot to sort of balance. So this would dive into, how are communities grappling with the full range of graduation requirements? What are the scheduling implications of that? Are there opportunities where we can align those better with some of this career-focused instruction and work-based learning? Or are there places where clarification is needed? So that would be sort of the focus of graduation requirements. And then dual credit teacher credentialing. So this comes up a lot, right? Because we have, teacher needs in the state in general. But what are ways that the state might want to consider scaling up the dual credit qualified teacher workforce? So this is an example of one where there are some other groups discussing these things, but how can we complement their work? We have sort of a little bit of a different audience than some of the other folks that are talking about this. But these are kind of 3 topics of interest. If anyone else has additional topics, feel free to share. You can drop them in the chat or unmute yourself. Once again, I feel like I'm always sharing this, but please come for our 12th annual Success Network Conference. So that conference will be February 25th. Little different this year. If you've been with us before, it's going to be in Champaign, Illinois. Which as an Illini, I am excited about. But just a new place if you haven't been before, because, where the Chicago area is far for you, hopefully this is incentive and a sign that you should join us this year in Champaign. Registration is open. Edith already shared the link in the chat to register for the Success Network Conference. If you have any questions about the Success Network Conference, please let us know. We have many people here who can answer those for you. I feel like we have a really good lineup of sessions and a really cool theme this year. So I feel like it's going to be a good one. So I'd encourage you all to join us. Just the one day. Coming up from the Success Network, so we also already mentioned, but have the registration for our data deep dive, which will be Thursday, January 23rd, diving on a deeper level of some of the stuff that we just started to scratch the surface with today. And then the next full policy committee meeting will be March 3rd, 2025. And you can also register for that and mark your calendar if you would like to join us. As mentioned, the follow-up messages, the Success Network website will all have these slides. The many, many links that we threw at you all today will be in them. So if you are looking for, any of these tools, resources, things we talked about, or the registration links to share with your colleagues to reference back to, please feel free to keep an eye out and read our emails, but also it'll all be on the policy committee website. With that, thank you all for being here today.